Actually, we should start with good news from Congress. They are trying to bring Afghans and calling on Biden for supporting the Afghan interpreter and Afghan allies. Are you involved? I'm sure. What is it, the timeline, and what about logistic? Probably people want to know a little bit more about it.
I actually testified before the United States Senate yesterday on this issue of ensuring the safety of those who have been our allies in Afghanistan, primarily interpreters, but others as well. And indeed, there is strong bipartisan support for steps to bring our allies to safety, even though the visa processing hasn't been completed. It's the only answer now. Things are moving so quickly. The Taliban is gaining ground. We will have completed our force withdrawal well before September 11 as on the current timeline. So we have to move now. It will be difficult. It will be a security and a logistical challenge to get the air support that is necessary to remove, could be as many as 70,000 people. The number of individuals that are eligible, in our view, is 18,000. If one estimates conservatively that each individual would have a spouse and 2 kids, you're talking over 70,000 right there. So it has got to happen quickly. Steps have to be taken to ensure that the transit of personnel to an airfield is secure. Then, of course, quite a number of aircraft are going to be necessary to do this. So there is no other good solution given the timelines here. We have a moral obligation to those who risk their lives to support us in the field. And the only way we can meet it, I think, is through a large-scale evacuation.
So how do you assess President Ghani's or Afghanistan delegation visit to Washington? This interview will air after. So what's your thoughts about it? What it will change for Afghanistan, or what it will bring for Afghan people from this visit?
I think that the visit is important. I'm not entirely sure it's going to produce concrete results. But I hope the meeting itself and the images of the meeting will convey a message to the Afghan people, the government and the population, as well as the Taliban, that the United States does remain engaged, that the president takes Afghanistan and its leadership seriously, that the president has access to the White House. Many world leaders do not. That therefore the Taliban must be very measured and very careful about what they do on the ground. That the United States is still engaged. That the president's focus remains on Afghanistan. Those are important messages.
So Taliban are intensifying the attacks, and they claim also some of the district, and Defense Ministry armed the locals to fight back, and also Afghan forces are fighting back. So do you think Taliban are taking advantage of US withdrawal, and they are thinking of abandoning the peace talks, like ultimately and totally?
Let me be clear here. Those were never peace talks. When President Trump initiated those talks in Doha, it was between the Taliban and the Americans, with the government of Afghanistan not present. That had been a long-standing demand of the Taliban, always ready to talk to the US, but not to what they labeled a puppet regime. So these weren't talks about peace, and the later introduction of Afghan officials to the talks didn't really change the dynamic. So talks like these are going to produce nothing good for the people of Afghanistan themselves. And obviously now the Taliban has no interest in talking further. Canceled their participation in the Istanbul discussion. They are interested now in gaining ground, not in making peace.
So what is concerning for you regarding Afghanistan situation? Do you believe Taliban has the ability to topple the Afghan government and regain the control of the country once again, like 90s?
It's very hard to say, but it is extremely worrisome. They certainly have the power to plunge the country into another phase of a civil war, if you will. And we could be seeing violent instability and unrest. We're already seeing it as the Taliban tries to advance into areas they have not previously held. Can that bring the government down? I mean, I have no way of knowing. I have watched with great admiration the courage and tenacity of the Afghan security forces in resisting efforts by the Taliban. It is going to get harder. It is not just our forces that are withdrawing, our contractors are withdrawing as well. They maintain, for example, the Afghan Air Force's aircraft, fixed wing and helicopter. Well, when those contractors leave, the government of Afghanistan loses the capability to maintain those airframes, which have been essential in the ground forces posture. So part of what you're seeing, I think, that looks like a successful Taliban advance against retreating Afghan troops is not exactly that. Without air support, a number of forward positions are going to have to be abandoned. It's a tactical necessity. It doesn't mean that that somehow the Taliban have turned into the strongest army in the world. It's not that at all. The maintenance of these forward posts was dependent on air support. If the air support goes, these positions are going to have to be abandoned.
So last question, sir. How do you see the role of Pakistan in this situation concerning insecurity concerns in Afghanistan? If situation, let's say, get worsened for Afghanistan and Taliban gain more ground, how do you see that Pakistan can play an honest and loyal role as a neighbor of Afghanistan?
Pakistan, of course, has long supported the Taliban. They supported the Taliban back in the 90s in the move to take Kabul, and they have supported them since after 9/11, giving sanctuary and safe haven to Taliban leaders. The Quetta Shura is now known to everyone. But now the Pakistanis have a problem, and the problem is a return to widespread violence in Afghanistan is going to produce the kinds of refugee flows that we saw the last time around. Pakistan has been greatly affected by Afghan refugee flows, as has Iran. So the Pakistanis have a strong interest in using their influence with the Taliban to ensure that they don't start another massive civil war that produced thousands and thousands of Afghans fleeing into Pakistan's northwest areas. So I would hope very much that the Pakistanis will behave responsibly, will take the necessary steps to ensure that the Taliban do not once more produce a refugee flow that Pakistan simply cannot handle.